We're live right now, Harry.
Yes, I saw that.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was looking in the wrong place. Right, well, good morning to Mirador people. We are live this morning, but Harry will join us on record with this program tomorrow when we bring you, first of all, the two Bs, and then a little session with Harry, and hopefully a little session with me. And we are building back to our serious stuff, ready for September, Harry. What do you make of this secret trip to Moscow by Trump's emissary?
Well, head of the CIA, in fact, and so quite an important person. And it's the second such visit in recent years. His predecessor, as head of the CIA, went to Moscow to warn Putin about the futility of invading Ukraine, to try and deter him from that silly action, and of course was ignored. And Putin went ahead 4 years ago with the invasion and is paying the price. And so now, with threats by Putin against NATO allies who are providing weaponry and help, military help to Zelensky, to Ukraine, he's gone with a similar warning that he stopped threatening NATO, otherwise they'll pay a very heavy price. So I think it's a similar warning. Now, quite probably, knowing the character involved, Putin, he will just ignore it and push on. But he is getting desperate when he's starting to threaten military type action against NATO countries. Not necessarily outright war, but bombarding factories that manufacture weaponry that we're then supplying to Ukraine. But effectively, we are already at war with Russia. It's just not a declared war. And that war extends far beyond weaponry to Ukraine. It covers the fact that the Russians have largely taken control of the channel. We don't have a navy anymore that can counter that. And they are also interfering constantly electronically with our systems in Britain and threatening to bring certain parts of industry to a halt. So there is a covert war going on already between Britain and many other Western countries with Russia. But these could be interpreted as the last acts of desperation in the Russian situation. And of course, what's probably most important coming to a head is that after the upcoming elections in Russia in September, they're scheduled for, which will be a nonsensical, it'll be a sham election, and Putin will be re-elected, obviously. And then with the re-election, with the elan that gives him, he will announce mass mobilization. And this could be the end of him, because until now, they've been simply putting people into the meat grinder that they've picked up all over in the remote parts of Russia, or even from prisons and vagabonds, and they're being slaughtered by the hundreds of thousands. The death and wounded rate is said to be about 1.5 million now. But if he goes into general mobilization, he will then have to be calling up the sons and daughters of bourgeois families, of middle class families. And this is what actually brought an end to the Soviet Union, because when the middle class sons and daughters were coming home in body bags or in zinc coffins, as was the term at the time, it caused a huge uprising in Russia and destroyed the Russian system. And they had to back off and pull out of Afghanistan. So once the Western more comfortably off middle-class Russians see their children going into the meat grinder, they will react, and Putin will be chased out, I think. There'll be some sort of a palace revolution. And so I think it's a very serious step for him to take, but it's the step that he has to take because he's run out of manpower to fight the war. He's even having to import military help from North Korea. And so it is the signs of a desperate man. Uh, so that I think we should be looking at that much more than we should be looking at the threats of either bombarding or electronically interfering with the UK weapons industry.
What do you think? I mean, obviously, the CIA is not going to go to Moscow face to face without giving some sort of ultimatum. What sort of ultimatum do you think that this emissary is giving?
Well, it's difficult to know what sort of an ultimatum they could give. They could, of course, supply blueprints for Patriot missiles and all sorts of other things. They could increase their help to Ukraine because Ukraine essentially is fighting our war for us. And they're sacrificing themselves to hold the Russian ambitions at bay, to keep them in check. And so that is why we in NATO are providing weaponry and advice and training to the Ukrainians, because they're in fact fighting and dying for us. And even though the war seems a long way away, it isn't. It's right on our doorstep. And if we don't help the Ukraine stem the tide, then very soon the waves will be washing over us. But what level of threat he can make to the Russians is difficult. Obviously, we're not talking about extreme threats such as nuclear, because Russia is crazy enough to go nuclear itself, even tactical nuclear in this war if they feel they're losing it. So it would be more, I think, of economic threats, the kind of threat that the Americans are now applying to Iran when they've seen that their military initiative in Iran has stalled, and they haven't failed actually in the Iranian war, so they're going to fight an economic war now, instead blockading the Iranian ports. Well, there could be something very similar applied to Russia. And of course, Russia, whose lifeline is the exportation of petroleum products, already with their shadow fleet, that's being hindered and being put to under serious threat. So there's all sorts of economic pressure that America could put on Russia if necessary. I don't think it's a military threat that they're making, but saying that, look, this is the limit, don't cross this line, don't dare start attacking NATO facilities.
Well, Harry, we both know the temperament that Putin shows, and even you are betting that he will say, I'm going to ignore this, stuff off. Suppose he does that. Let's put America aside for a moment. What do you think the rest of the NATO countries how are they going to react?
Well, I think that, first of all, the ability to react is negligible, apart from some of the eastern countries like Poland, which has rearmed massively, and Hungary to a certain degree. But Poland will now be a formidable foe if he starts to attack there. So try and attack the softer elements, the Baltic states perhaps, and take other initiatives in that area. But France, Britain, I'm not sure we could defend ourselves at all. We couldn't even defend our capital. We virtually have no army and navy of consequence left that could fight much longer than a week or two. And we have no aerial defenses for London. Would be a sitting duck target for them if they went that far. But to go back on what I said at the beginning, I'm not sure that he will ignore this advice, this threat, if you will, that the CIA director has flown in to bring to him. I think what it will do is simply it will curb his ambitions. He will not back off the Ukrainian adventure is going to pursue that blindly until the end. And there's a very good chance now that he'll lose that as long as we, NATO, or at least we, the Western nations, don't lose our courage and stop supplying Ukraine. The Americans backed off. They were helping Ukraine massively at the beginning, but then they pulled back, and for reasons that I don't understand. Trump is such an elusive character that he's brought the United States into great mistrust. Nobody trusts the United States anymore. It's going to take years and years to build back confidence in the United States. It's all because of Trump, erratic behavior. And so what we have to hope is that the Western countries, and well, I call it NATO, the NATO countries, do not lose heart and keep backing Ukraine. And they need to in their own interest, because, as I say, if they don't, the war will be on our doorstep very quickly.
Our own Prime Minister was there, a few days ago, much heraldry and so on. But reports are that he went with blueprints for some UK technology tucked under his arm and said, "Here, you are welcome to these." Are other NATO countries likely to give that sort of assistance?
Well, first of all, it's a little bit of a myth that he gave them blueprints to Storm Shadow. We maybe well have given them blueprints, but Storm Shadow is essentially a French manufacturer. The only part of it I think that Britain makes is the head, the warhead, and maybe other bits and pieces. I'm not sure, and you can put any other kind of warhead on it. So handing over the blueprints to Storm Shadow is more of a symbolic act than any real transfer of military technology. And as I say, Storm Shadow is essentially a French invention, French manufactured, put together in France. We just simply supply just a small part of it. But if we're given over the blueprints to it, then obviously it was with the approval of the French. But that's just political game playing. Much more important.
Where will the game go? If, at the moment, you've got a dying administration likely to get my girlfriend Marina in charge sometime next year. How will that change the game, do you think, or will it?
Well, we're talking about a change of leadership in Ukraine, are you?
No, I'm talking about a change of leadership in France.
Oh, in France. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm out of context. Yes. Well, the polls at the moment are very strongly in favor of Marine Le Pen becoming president of France next year, and any of the opposition, she beats them very handily in the first term, because, as you know, French presidential elections, it's a two-phase election. In the first round, she'll win handily. She'll get about 38, 39%, and the nearest rival will get about 17%. And then in the face-off in the second round, she will get 68 to 70%, according to the polls. And the nearest rival would only get well below half of, somewhere in the 40s percent. So she'll win handily on that basis. Now, having said that, France is essentially a left-wing country. The center of politics in France is biased towards the left. So there may be an anti-Le Pen backlash, which supports Edouard Philippe if he comes in as number two, though he's not scheduled to do so at the moment, as the rival in the second round, and just simply get behind him. But if Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is not just the socialist, but the wild-eyed Trotskyist, extreme left, looks like the potential contender in the second round, she'll beat him handily. So, but if there was, by any chance, Edouard Philippe, Mayor of Le Havre, playing in the second round of the presidential elections, there may be a reaction that everybody gets behind him, and it may make it a close contest. But if I were to put money on it, I'd say that the next president of the French Republic is going to be Marine Le Pen.
Now, you say that the polls favour this result, and in fact, Poland probably of all the old East European countries has been the most aggressive in rearming and in fact boosting their economy. Um, in support of Marina, does that mean that they've been talking quietly behind closed doors, and what they've been saying is much the same sort of thing?
Well, they won't admit it, but there is a drift to the right in most of European politics, with the exception, of course, of Spain, which is quite left wing under Sanchez. But there is a drift to the right, so there will be quite an acquiescence, quite an acceptance of a right wing government in France. There again, we've got to revise our views. As I've said before on this program, the Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, was definitely very right wing, and some of his views were quite extreme. But to make her more palatable, make herself more electable to the French public, because it is a left-wing style of public, she has become much more the Workers' Party as opposed to a right-wing party. And it's the working classes that she's harnessed, which has formed the basis of her political strength. And so I don't see any extreme right-wing policies coming under her mandate. She is going to shake up the system, that's for sure. It needs shaking up. It's a cozy old boys' club, and they've created an elitist system under the French political procedure, and that will be shaken up. But I don't think I don't see it going to the right wing at all. She's accused of being right wing by her left wing opponents, but I think she's much more of a workers' class representative, and she sees she's captured the red wall, if you put it into English terms.
Now, our own Prime Minister Burnham has spent the very early part of his premiership dancing around with domestic policies and throwing out money left, right, and centre, which rightly the opposition parties are now beginning to say, "Hey, come on, explain how you're going to pay for these things." And he's already backing off on some of them. What do you think that Marina will do if and when she takes over the presidency? Will she concentrate on domestic issues, or will she stick her nose into the international crises, as I see it, straight away?
Well, I see Marine Le Pen being very much domestically oriented, as opposed to being into international politics, very similar to Andy Burnham. In fact, Andy Burnham has very little knowledge of external politics. He's more of a social reformer in Britain. Starmer tried to play the role of on the international scene, constantly traveling abroad, giving Britain a higher profile abroad, but that's not Andy Burnham's style. And I think that's a very similar style that Marine Le Pen would follow. So she'll initially try to rectify some of the not, I won't say inequalities, but she'll try and bring law and order back to France, because law and order in both France and Britain has gone by the boards. Britain is in terrible state with law and order, with all the asylum seekers coming in, rapes and burglaries, attacks, and what have you coming, all being swept under the carpet by the current government and by the previous government, the Conservatives too. I mean, they're to blame just as much as the present government is. And you got the same situation in France, where the truth of social disruption is being hidden from the electorate, and we've got a very much of a controlled press in France, both television and radio and newspapers are quite left wing, and to a degree you have that in Britain. You've got a few centre-right outlets like the Telegraph and the Mail, but essentially, outfits like the BBC. It's just scandalous. It's just a hotbed of socialism, and they and they're feeding a lot of nonsense to the British public and hiding various social problems away from them. And I don't think the average British voter tends more to be interested in the price of beer than in what's happening in some far away foreign place that they go to for a couple of weeks a year to get a sunburn, get a suntan. Um, I and so they should be. I mean, because um, you know. Uh, those of us simple folk like you and me, what do we really know about international affairs? We're much more interested in income tax and how much we pay to buy a house and stamp duty and issues that affect us on a daily basis. As I say, the price of beer, which has gone through the roof. I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
only the wealthy can get a glow on these days. Mm-hmm.
But could you see the unlikely scenario at the moment? But then unlikely scenarios change very rapidly. Countries like Poland or even the Czech Republic, where right-wing politics are beginning to surface quite strongly, start to take the lead, political lead in Europe.
Well, remember, politics is cyclical. You get swings to the left, swings to the right. And so what's happening in Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic and Slovakia are simply political swings that follow the normal pattern. What is happening in Hungary and Poland is, of course, they're in the immediate line of fire. So this is a natural reaction for survival. And their politicians are not necessarily extreme right wing. In fact, some of them have got definite left wing tendencies, but they realize that they've got to take a right wing stance. They've got to rearm. Poland is now spending upwards of 4% on its rearmament. As we know, Britain is way below its target and showing no signs of wanting to really provide for its own defense. God knows what would happen to Britain if there was a war. I don't think it would last, as I say, more than a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Where do countries like Lithuania and Armenia and so on, who are frontline states when it comes to Russia, where do they stand in terms of support for Poland and Hungary?
Well, I think Armenia, places like that, their threat is not so much from Russia, but from Turkey. And the Russians have grabbed land in Armenia, think about a third of it, I'm not sure. But the much greater threat is not from Russia, but from Turkey, which is starting to establish its regional hegemony quite openly. And due to the Iran fiasco, they're going to be playing a much greater role and therefore influencing, as I say, places like Armenia. I don't think the particular threat there is from Russia. Russia is seeking to recreate the old Russian Empire, the glory days, and Putin himself is a creature of that. And so his dream is to establish the glory of Russia once again. But I think his time is past. His days are numbered. His ideas are no longer espoused by that very, very strong middle class in Russia, which has emerged, which is being shielded from the war at the moment. But the moment they're exposed to it, or their sons and daughters are, they'll turn on him, and that Russian threat will disappear. And Russia, of course, is not the main threat. The main threat is China, to a degree, North Korea, and Iran is in there for something. Iran pulls through and survives, it's going to be much stronger than it was before. I mean, Trump has totally screwed up in Iran, but he's a bit of a idiot anyway. So I mean, it's hopefully somebody will follow him and get the show back on the road. He'll be a lame duck president after the midterms, I'm sure, because he'll lose Congress. Well, certainly lose the Senate, and maybe that'll curb his ambitions a little bit, and he'll be simply looking for his place in history. But he's turned out in the second term to be quite unpredictable, quite untrustworthy, and in fact quite out of his depth. Some of his ideas in the first term were good. After Sleepy Joe, America needed to be pulled back on track again into its old values, make America great again. I know that's what we call hubris, but nonetheless, it was a necessary step, and he reflected the will of the American people at that time. But his popularity ratings have gone through the floor now, and so I don't think he's going to be around much longer. If he survives the end of his second term without somebody bumping him off, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a miracle. But yeah, they tend to do that in American politics, and I think we've lost 4 presidents through assassination. I think in the States. Yeah, but anyway, there you go. Strange world.
Incidentally, Harry, Yerevan, which is the capital of Armenia, is you can't walk on any street without having the shadow of Mount Ararat looking down on you, which of course is in Turkey. And then if you decide that you're going to go into other parts of Armenia, you need to go along the border and before turning up into the mountains. And you go for mile after mile after mile after mile with a fence between the two countries, and the way across.
Well, is it a symbolic fence? I've never been there, so I haven't seen it. But is it a symbolic fence, or is it a
defensive? A tank would knock it down in 5 minutes.
Yes, that's what I thought.
It's symbolic in that sense. But it is very significant to the Armenian people, and I suppose to the Pakistanis.
So it's a fence that simply stops daily traffic between the two countries. Yeah.
I mean, one of the interesting things is if you look carefully over that border, you can see a little arrow in the sky that points down and says, "This is where the Ark landed."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now you make an interesting note there about North Korea. I mean, he hasn't fired off any of his toys recently, but it's such a small country, first of all, but secondly, with its ideology, is unlikely to have a proper industrial economy, the way that we understand it. Where is he being financed from?
Well, I think he's getting certain finances from illegal sources. I don't think he's particularly supported by Russia anymore, but he has highly industrialized the sector, the armament sector, and they domestically produced missiles. They are North Korean, and they're very high quality. And of course, since he went nuclear, he has developed quite a significant amount of hard power, and is a force to be reckoned with. He must, at this stage, be beginning to be of some concern to the Chinese themselves, that have they created a child monster? And when you refer to ideology, I'm not sure that they're ideological communists in North Korea. It's a cult. It's a leadership cult system. It's a totalitarian system where the leader is supreme, almost like a god. And I'm told that if you if you meet him, you're not even allowed to look him in the eye. You're supposed to avert your gaze out of respect for his total supremacy. So I don't see it as being a communist country in the traditional sense of the word. The people being a collective that seeks equality and what have you, the people themselves are oppressed. There's a great poverty, there's starvation, there are all sorts of things. But the military-industrial complex in North Korea is the golden boy, and they get all the goodies, and they've got the means, even in their limited economy, of developing very sophisticated weaponry.
Incidentally, once again, just a little aside, is at the moment a very popular program on UK TV is MASH, which
Oh,
is, of
yeah.
course, about the army hospitals in that conflict in the Korean War.
Sure, yeah.
So there is some reminder there of what it was all about. And they mentioned a date, 1950, which to most people is in the medieval times.
Indeed, yeah. Hmm.
Uh, right, Harry. Let's stay in the Far East for the moment. Um, where are we with some of the independent states that China would lust after?
Well, the big expansion program engaged in by China at the moment is in the South China Sea. They're trying to extend their hegemony into right up to the Philippines and even beyond, rebuilding what little atolls into actually military outposts, islands, and fully fledged islands on which they can put landing strips and that sort of thing. Now, that could well be. And I don't want to fall in line with their propaganda, but it could very well be a defensive posture as opposed to an attacking posture, because they don't need those outposts to attack their potential enemies like the United States. They've got weaponry that could easily reach the United States, and they're building up their nuclear arsenal quite strongly. So I would think that their idea to establish ownership of the South China Sea is the largest single threat. They've got this moral obligation, not moral, traditional obligation, I suppose, to reunite China. Since '49, they lost what they consider a province of Formosa, now Taiwan. And so inevitably they want to absorb that back into the fold by the 100th anniversary of their independence in '49. So it has to be done by 2049, and they're making steps in that direction. And that's going to be a tough one, because America has realized, I think, its limitations and will not go to the defense of Taiwan if push comes to shove. But Taiwan itself is going to be a tough nut to crack, and there will be one hell of a fight and tremendous loss in men and materials if the Chinese try to take it by force. So maybe establishing regional hegemony will just naturally collapse Taiwan into the Chinese fold.
And is that true of South Korea?
South Korea, it could apply to South Korea, but South Korea itself is becoming a highly sophisticated economy, and they too have got a strong military, not as strong as the North, but they still spend a fair portion of their national income on self-protection. So again, a hard nut to crack, and I'm not sure that the Chinese see that as part of their traditional homeland.
Thinking of Japan in the Asian complex, you've made the point several times that one of its strengths is that it's got in-house investment. In other words, it's the people that are investing in their own country rather than outside investment. How much outside investment is China subject to?
Oh, not an awful lot. China has got a huge national debt that people don't realize. It's in proportional terms, it's greater than that of the United States, if relating to its economy. And of course, Japan itself, I think, has got the world's of the major industrial nations, has got by far the world's biggest national debt. It's between, depending on how it's calculated, it's between 200 and 300% of its gross national product, gross domestic product. In Britain, we're at about 100%, just hitting 100% mark. France, 110. Germany's low, 67, but Japan is somewhere between 200 and 300%. But 80% of that is held by the Japanese people, little old ladies' savings accounts and that sort of thing. So there's an automatic break on that. But when the Western countries want to borrow money to increase their national debt, like Britain, they've got to go on attack the international bond market, and their credibility level on the international bond market is getting very fragile, both for the United States and Britain, for anybody else, because people can put their money into other investments much more safely. There's a lot of money around. The world is awash with money, looking for a home to be, but it's not going to necessarily be in national debt, in economies which are overspending and far more than they take in. And that, of course, is the basic problem with Britain. All of these ideas that are coming forward about taxing pensioners and wealthy pensioners and putting increased taxes on homes if homes have more value than another home, even though they don't get any more services. Because they have a nice home, they'll pay more tax for those services. This headlong rush to economic disaster will only stop when they realize they've got to stop spending as much as they are, and particularly on things like welfare. I mean, welfare can be controlled if you ideologically prepared to do it, which, of course, the socialist, the Labour backbench is not. And so Andy Burnham's hands are tied at the moment. But Britain's national debt will continue to expand to a point where it cannot be paid. The borrowing, out of the money borrowed by Britain at the moment, 4/5 of it goes to pay off the debt, the additional cost of the debt that they're borrowing. Well, that's a Ponzi scheme just waiting to collapse. So that's reaching the end of its possibilities. And unless it stops, it'll be another bailout from the International Monetary Fund. And so national debt factors in all of these Western countries, as I say, with possible exception of Germany at 67%, they're a serious threat not on the horizon, in the near future.
Just before we go back and take a look at the UK economy, going back to China, is their investment and debt package the sort of thing that would limit their ambitions in the southeast of Asia?
Well, China is in a very vulnerable position because they've tried desperately to transform their economy into a domestic economy. I mean, America, you could close the doors and it could continue to live quite handsomely on just its internal exchanges. But China is an export or die nation, and its wealth or its means of continuing to pay for all of its huge expansion, diplomatic, military, you name it, is based on its huge export surplus. It's something like, I don't know, 800 billion they've got in the excess, and it's a massive amount of money in their export surplus. And the Western nations, notably Britain, and to a degree the other countries, have allowed themselves to deindustrialize simply to buy cheap Chinese products. Well, they've messed up their own economies. They've lost their industrial dominance in many areas. and they become reliable on China. So it's only when we start building again in Europe or and thinking in Britain in particular, and our domestic industries build back up again, that we'll have any chance of blunting the Chinese export initiative. But that's where their money comes from. If their markets dried up, they'd be in serious trouble.
Right, let's return to the UK. We've got a new Prime Minister. As I said, he took his first toe, or dipped his toe into international affairs a few days ago with Ukraine. But other than that, he seemed to ignore anything overseas to look after what he considers to be the most important thing, and that is the domestic economy, and continues to throw ideas around like confetti without looking into the treasury box. Is that an unfair assessment?
It's a very fair assessment, I think. Remember that Andy Burnham, much more affable, much more likable character than Starmer, who was a bit dry, is still very much a prisoner of his ideologies. He's a dyed-in-the-wool socialist, and I would imagine that he's a favorite for the moment of his backbenchers, and so he's going to take Britain more to the left. There's no question about it. And many of the ideas that he's got might be nice social ideas, but who's going to pay for them? And already Britain is living beyond its means, and so there will ultimately be some form of financial collapse with Andy Burnham's policies. But until they have the realization that they've got to cut expenditure, it's going to go down that slippery slope, and I think it'll be. And of course, one of the things he's doing is coming up with these ideas, which sound pretty good, and hasn't enacted them yet. They're all something he's going to do next year or the year after, and few little bits and pieces, snippets is handed to national insurance and pubs and that sort of thing. But essentially, thousands of pubs will go under before even the effect of his little measures take hold. And then again, is he playing to a political audience with a view to not, certainly to the next elections in, 29, or even playing to the possibility of a premature election to not necessarily increase his majority, reduce his majority, but he would strengthen his manifesto capabilities, because I remember in the current socialist government was elected on the promise that they wouldn't raise taxes or income taxes, and they're raising everything but. And so maybe he has to raise income taxes, and he'll need a political mandate to do so. So he'll go to the polls early, as opposed to wait until the end of the parliamentary period in power. So
has Farage gone off the boil?
Farage, I don't know that Farage is going to get elected. I think he represents a protest, a genuine protest among the British people, and if Andy Burnham puts off an election till the end of the current term, it could give an opportunity for the Conservatives to rebuild. And Kemi Badenoch is she will not ally with Farage. She'll not ally with Reform, and Reform will not ally itself with Restore. So that will remain fragmented. So the only hope of opposition to Andy Burnham will be a rebirth of the Conservative Party, and she is showing signs of doing that by getting rid of all of the Conservative wets and getting some new faces in, which she needs to. virtually, it needs to be cleaned out of any of the old faces from the old government, the old conservative government, who proved themselves to be quite useless. And so she needs new faces, new people, new ideas. And she seems to be slowly turning the ship of, not the ship of state, the ship of party around and taking it in that direction. I think she's doing quite a remarkable job, and she may just pull it off. But it may require another period of socialist rule before she can get the Conservatives back into a reasonable battle order.
You think that that the anti-socialist feeling, which there was before Burnham took over, is not likely to return?
Oh, I think if he makes some of the right moves, if he can overrule his backbenchers and make some cuts in expenditure, and start to try and get some growth back into the British economy, and chooses his re-election time astutely, he may just pull it off and get another term.
Okay, let's go to the Gulf of Hormuz.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
World.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening there, Harry?
Well, this idiot Trump got messed things up completely. He went into a war without knowing quite what his objectives were. He went in. He did the right thing, in fact, is to prevent Iran getting the bomb. They were very close to getting the bomb, the atomic weapon, and we see how these nutcases in Iran would have throw it around like confetti if they got it. The way they throw missiles around now, they would be throwing atomic bombs around, and that would be. So the initial idea of doing something about it was a noble idea on Trump's part, but with no planning and no idea what his real objectives were beyond that, and no exit plan, no post-war planning, and knowing he can't, because of political considerations, put boots on the ground in Iran. The American public would not accept that. He was elected on the basis of keeping America out of foreign military adventures. So he just made a total mess of it. Now, he has now changed tactics and is trying to put the economic squeeze on Iran. And that could work. It could work because already inflation is just, when you say going through the roof, I mean, it is just monstrous, the inflation that's happening in Iran right now. And there will become a point when they can't print more, just keep printing more money to pay the Revolutionary Guard and the basic supporters. So it could lead to an undermining of the regime. But they'll not go quietly. They'll not suffer. They'll still keep their goodies and lifestyles, and so it's going to take a long, hard squeeze. And what effect that will have on the world economy in the meantime is of course Trump's tenure as his period in power will come to an end. So it would need a policy like that would need to be continued with the next U.S. president, and alternative means of getting oil to market to protect the world economy. But it does show signs of working, the economic blockade of Iran, much better than the bombarding them every night.
What about the other countries such as Syria, Iraq, and I mean, for that matter, Israel? What part will they play in the development of things in that part of the world?
Well, most of these countries, if you've got the Arab-Israeli conflict in mind, that's one aspect of looking at it. Or if you're looking at it from a point of view of some of these countries, such as Syria, emerging from dictatorship, there is hope for them, I guess, within the context of what their ambitions, where their ambitions may lie. So I'm hopeful. I'm not very hopeful on the Gaza situation. The people forget that Israel occupied Gaza and then pulled out completely, pulled out of its settlements. They pulled out of all of their citizens. They said, okay, it's yours, do with it what you will. And look at the mess they've made of it. So to try and establish a Palestinian state based on Gaza or parts of the West Bank, I think is an operation doomed to failure. And the collective Arab wish, of course, is to see Israel eliminated from the river to the sea philosophy. And so we're going to have upheaval in that part of the world, I think, for a long time to come. But some of the countries individually may pull their irons out of the fire and start to make a better life for their citizens.
Yes, I mean, Beirut was once the garden of the Middle East and is now a shattered ruin.
Yeah.
I mean, is that likely to return, or is it going to remain victim of the violence that takes place there?
Well, one thing that Trump could do with his long reach, with America's long reach, of course, is to try and impose some sort of a new peace plan, political stability plan on the area, starting with this peace initiative in Gaza, and nobody seems to know quite where that stands. Has he lost interest? If he wants to leave a political legacy, that's one that he could probably rebuild some form of credibility by starting there. And so I don't know. I think what has come out of this whole situation is that American power cannot extend as far as it used to be able to. It's still a huge force to be reckoned with, still the world's biggest economy, and it could have tremendous influence on the Middle East and put order back in there, but not militarily. Almost it's got to be inspirationally or setting up systems of structure that allow these people to develop into reasonably free democracies. They, of course, got the overlap of religious ideologies, which is going to be a tough nut to crack. That's always been competition with political and democratic ambitions. But there is hope. There has to be hope. I mean, if you give up hope, well, then you might as well just sort of pack it in and go off to the pub, you know.
Which the British are actually doing at the moment.
Of course, but political upheaval has always been, it's the history of the world. And I don't know whether it's come to your attention, but today is a very important day in history. In 1346, does that ring a bell to you?
Not particularly.
Battle of Crécy.
Ah.
Yes, when Henry III's troops took on Philip IV of France's troops to determine who was going to become eventually King of France. And remember the beginning of the 100 Years' War began in 1337 when the King Philip IV died, and the person who should have inherited the throne would have been Edward III of England. Inherited the throne would have Henry III of England. He was, in fact, the direct grandson of Philippe le Bel, who was King of France, and so he had more rights than Philip VI, who was a cousin germain of the inheritor. And so Edward had more right, and so that was the beginning of the 100 Years' War, and the fact that the French had taken over Guyenne, which was very much a part of English rule, and so naturally the two nations went to war, and the 100 Years' War, which lasted 117 years, I believe, or 116, I'm not sure, was quite an upheaval. England won the first round, and the French, as we know, won the second round, Battle of Castillon in 1453. and pretty much that's when France and England became separate entities. But today is the day when that was, fought it out.
That started, really, yeah.
The end of cavalry, I suppose, as a military instrument, defeated by the solid English bowmen, most of whom were Welsh. But
Indeed.
yeah,
In fact, that war, that 100 Years' War, had quite an effect upon the town where I'm sitting at the moment.
oh, indeed, yeah.
Two things. First of all, because it was costing so much and ravaging the English economy, it triggered the Peasants' Revolt, which spread right across England and caused Richard, I think, is Richard II, was it? To become very defensive. The Archbishop of Canterbury was murdered, and some officials of Richard's court were murdered.
Henry, you're talking Henry II, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Becket,
Well,
yeah.
If I got the kings wrong.
Yeah, okay.
But the peasants actually reached Lewes, burst into the castle, and found that the cellars were full of good Normandy wine.
Yeah.
And they all got drunk for 2 days, stole one stone out of the castle wall, and moved on without harming anybody.
Yeah.
And a little later, the French fleet actually managed to get up the Ouse and take over Lewes and raise the French flag, or whichever flag it was, and rule it for a day or two. So there was quite a marked impact on this part of the world from today's anniversary.
Oh, indeed. And as you say, the Peasants' Revolt.
Indeed.
Or the revolting peasants. Well,
Harry, we've only got 2 minutes left. I like to get your view on the emerging economies, as it were, Africa and the southern states, like southern continents, like Australia and so on. Anything significant happening in either of those two?
And not really. I think many African countries are coming into their own. They're passing slowly but surely through the phase of dictatorship and becoming more democratic in their structure. So there is a lot of hope for Africa. There's a lot of money flowing in. There's a lot of still colonial activity in Africa in the sense of economic investment, developing new systems, new farming techniques, new ways of transforming African-style crops into, let's say, fuel, other needs. So Africa, in the cyclical system of the world's evolution, has got a great future ahead of it. It will never become a unified continent, in my opinion, because historically tribal boundaries, geographical boundaries as such, and primary economic interests will determine the way each individual country goes. But no, I have high hopes of Africa, and I won't live to see it. But I think the next 100 years, just like India in Asia, not China, not Japan, but India, will become the dominant force. I think in the next 100 years, that Africa will become much, much more important than Europe. Europe's days are numbered. It's our day in the sunshine is gone.
I'm glad that you mentioned India, because it is becoming actually an economic power now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Who is?
India.
India. Oh, absolutely, and also they've managed to restructure, and they've had very good, strong central guidance, because holding India together is not an easy task. Of a nation that speaks 300 different languages and different traditions and what have you, but No, it is becoming a political, industrial, and economic entity in itself, and is still growing very strongly.
Harry, my boss, Teddy, is just coming through the door and is waving his Fulham program at me.
Okay, well, great to talk to you.
Morning.
Good morning. Yeah.
Uh,
So we'll catch up with you.
he's a bit sore at the moment because Fulham have not had the greatest start to the season, although their new manager seems to be showing some promise, I think.
Okay.
It's just a game of football. That's all. Not important.
So we'll see you next week, I guess, on Thursday, is it?
Yes, Harry, this program will be played out again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, just so that viewers know that they can see it again. If they haven't seen it today, they can see it for the first time. If they have seen it and there are things that we've discussed that intrigue them, and I think there are a lot that is intriguing, it will be there on view right after the two Bs, the two barristers, come along and discuss what's going on in the courts.
Yes.
So we'll
one last thing, of course, that we should do today is take off our hats and say a little prayer for Dolly Parton.
Oh, indeed.
Dolly's left us. Cancer got her in the end, but a great singer.
You can't have loved her as much as I loved her, Harry.
No, she's a remarkable woman, and I
absolutely.
think she'll be missed.
And her iconic movie, 9 to 5, is just absolutely a fabulous movie. I could watch it 20 times.
Mm-hmm. Well, she'll be missed, but she'll be warmly remembered.
Indeed, and well remembered. Okay, Harry.
We'll catch up with you next week.
But we'll talk to you next week.
Okay. God bless. Bye.
Bye.
See you, Harry.
Bye. Bye now.